The cold December wind cut through Sarah's thin jacket as she sat on the cracked hospital bench, clutching a folder filled with her medical reports. Her hands trembled, not just from the chill, but from the words that still echoed in her mind. "We're sorry, Miss Parker. Without insurance or payment, we can't proceed with your treatment." It felt like her entire world had collapsed. The diagnosis of cancer was already a heavy blow, but the cruelty of being denied treatment simply because she couldn't afford it broke her spirit even more. Sarah had worked as a waitress all her life, saving every penny for her teenage daughter, Lily. But cancer doesn't wait for savings. It eats away at your body and your hope, all while the world carries on, indifferent. Sarah had walked miles to reach that hospital, believing it would be her salvation. Instead, she was treated like a burden. The receptionist didn't even look up from her desk when she said, "Next." As if Sarah's pain didn't matter, she stumbled outside, tears streaming down her pale cheeks. The sound of motorcycles roaring in the distance caught her attention, but she was too weak to care. She simply sank to the sidewalk, whispering, "How do I tell Lily I can't fight anymore?" Moments later, the rumbling grew louder. A group of bikers, black leather, tattoos, and tough faces, pulled up near the clinic. At the front was a man everyone in the small town knew, Jack Iron Dalton, the leader of the local biker club known as the Iron Hearts. To most people, they were troublemakers. To those who truly knew them, they were men who carried loyalty and compassion like a badge of honor. Iron noticed the frail woman on the curb, her head buried in her arms. He parked his Harley and walked over. "Hey, ma'am, you okay?" he asked softly, kneeling beside her. Sarah lifted her tear-streaked face, eyes red and tired. They won't treat me. I have cancer. They said I'm not covered. I don't have the money." Her voice cracked, and she lowered her head in shame. Iron clenched his jaw. He had seen a lot in life. Loss, betrayal, injustice, but nothing burned him more than watching good people suffer because of greed. He looked toward the clinic doors where a nurse was glancing at them nervously through the glass. "Stay right here," he said, standing up. Without hesitation, Iron marched into the clinic, his boots echoing off the floor. His brothers followed behind him, silent, intimidating, and united. Patients and staff turned to stare as the bikers lined up inside the lobby. The same receptionist who had ignored Sarah just moments ago now froze at the sight of them. Iron leaned on the counter. "You turned away a woman who needs cancer treatment," he said in a calm but firm tone. "You should be ashamed of yourselves." The manager, a man in a suit far too expensive for his character, stepped forward. "This is a private institution, sir. We have policies. If she can't pay, we can't help her." Iron's voice hardened. "You run a clinic, not a business empire. That woman is dying out there while you count your money." The room went silent. Everyone felt the weight of his words. Then Iron turned to his men and said, "We're not leaving until she gets the treatment she needs." The bikers nodded in unison. One of them, a tall man named Logan, pulled out a thick envelope and dropped it on the counter. "That's her first round. Cash." The manager's eyes widened. You can't just—" Iron cut him off. "We just did." But the bikers didn't stop there. They started a fundraiser through their biker network. They organized charity rides, sold handmade leather bracelets, and even auctioned off some of their own bikes. Within 2 weeks, Sarah's entire treatment was paid for. The story spread across the town like wildfire. Local news channels picked it up, calling it the Ride of Hope. For the first time in months, Sarah smiled, a real smile. Every time she sat in the chemo chair, she'd see the bikers waiting in the lobby, cheering her on like family. Lily became especially close to them, calling Iron Uncle Jack. They'd bring her food, drive her to appointments, and make her laugh when the pain became too much to bear. Yet, not everything came easy. There were days when Sarah wanted to give up. The treatment made her weak, and the medical bills kept piling up despite their efforts. Iron faced pressure from within the community, people saying the bikers were only doing it for attention. But he didn't care. He had buried friends who had died because no one cared enough to step in. He wasn't about to let that happen again. Months passed. One spring morning, Sarah stood outside her house with a small bouquet of flowers. Her hair was starting to grow back, and her face had color again. The rumble of motorcycles filled the air as the Iron Hearts pulled up. She ran toward them, tears of joy streaming down her face. "I'm cancer-free," she cried. The bikers erupted in cheers, engines revving in celebration. Iron stepped forward and hugged her gently. "Told you, Sarah, you're tougher than cancer." That day, they didn't just celebrate her recovery, they celebrated humanity. Because in a world where people walk past pain, these men on bikes proved that compassion still roars louder than greed. The clinic, embarrassed by the public backlash, changed its policy. They started a fund for low-income patients, inspired by Sarah's story and the bikers who stood up for her. And as for the Iron Hearts, they became legends, not for the noise of their engines, but for the noise they made when the world tried to stay silent. In the end, Sarah said something that stayed with everyone who heard her story. Heroes don't always wear uniforms. Sometimes they ride motorcycles. And from that day on, whenever the roar of engines echoed through town, people didn't look away in fear. They looked up in gratitude, knowing those men stood for something far greater than themselves. Moral compassion costs nothing, but it can save everything.